For our case study, we decided to choose the Gila Wilderness, and our main topic on that is the trail management. About the Gila Wilderness, the Gila Wilderness is part of the Gila National Forest, located in the southwest region of New Mexico. It is located just north of Silver City, New Mexico, and it is managed by the United States Forest Service. Along with the Gila Wilderness, there are two other wilderness areas in the Gila National Forest. These two areas are known as the Blue Range Wilderness and also the Aldo Leopold Wilderness, and they both lie adjacent to the Gila. The Gila is the largest wilderness area in New Mexico, and it is considered one of the largest areas in the southwestern United States. It is 558,000 acres big and runs 27 miles from north to south and also 39 miles from east to west.
On June 3rd, 1924, the Gila became the first designated wilderness area in the world thanks to the efforts of the conservationist Aldo Leopold. When Aldo Leopold writes about the Green Fire and the Wolf's Eyes in the Sand County Almanac, he is in the area that would eventually become the Gila Wilderness. This makes it the birthplace of the concept of wilderness, and the Gila National Forest has such an incredible legacy and niche because of that. The picture you see on the slide is Aldo Leopold in the Gila Wilderness.
The Gila is characterized by high mountain peaks, rolling hills, canyons, meadows, and woodland and grassland areas. It consists of unique features like the Mogollon Mountain Range, the Chihuahuan Desert, and the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument, which are natural caves that were inhabited by the Mogollon in the late 1200s. People come to the Gila for a more primitive recreation experience.
People come to the Gila for a more primitive recreation experience. They come for the trails and for in the wilderness experience. The most important thing about the trails is that they are the access into the wilderness. People use them to be able to get in and to get around the wilderness area for uses such as hiking, access, horseback riding, and hunting are some of the main uses of the trails. They're also used for administrative purposes like getting lookouts in and out of the wilderness, getting firefighters in and out, and even for scouting. The trails are really critical in any wilderness area. Without trails, you can't get in to use the area.
When you think about wilderness characters, wilderness doesn't mean that you cannot do anything. There are certain things that you can do and certain things that you can't do. Trails are a weird conundrum because when you think of wilderness, you think of it as a very primitive and natural area. However, you need trails to be able to access and get around inside the wilderness. Formal trails are necessary and appropriate in wilderness to provide safe visitor access and to protect natural resources from excessive impacts associated with visitor trail networks. Formal trails, in contrast to visitor-created trails, are generally well-designed and maintained to safely sustain visitation with limited impact. Trail management encompasses the on-the-ground stewardship performed by volunteers and employees to maintain the trail, its structures, its natural and cultural resources, and educating on trail use. It includes keeping the footpath clear of natural overgrowth and trees that have fallen down, building and relocating sections of the footpath, building and repairing shelters and other structures, caring for overnight sites, as well as educating trail users in classrooms and on the trail.
Another wilderness area with the same issues as the Gila National Park is a place called Clifty Wilderness, which is located in Kentucky. The main issues when interviewing a man named John Kosmierski revolved around the issues with the trail management. Overall, he had said the trails were in good condition in most areas, but in a few less popular areas, they can be very narrow and dangerous. He then got into how the trails sometimes can be affected by the weather and how it can cause landslides of mud and rocks and even eroding parts of the trail.
And another wilderness area with the same issues as well is called the Gates of Mountains of Wilderness. This wilderness area is located in Montana and is actually one of the smallest wilderness areas in the state. When conducting the interview with a man named Rick Barnes, he began to speak on the issues of maintaining the well-being of the trails as well. The wilderness area trails mainly lay below walls of rock, which will sometimes break off and fall onto the trail. This causes either destroying of the trail as a whole, or just sometimes breaking off and falling onto the trail and blocking it for a pathway of a hike. This issue is extremely common and sometimes isn't too easy to fix either. The boulders can tend to be massive, and also getting the necessary tools out in the middle of the wilderness area can be tricky as well.
The main trail issues that the Gila faces are erosion, weather events like a massive rain in the monsoon season that washes out areas along the trails, or fallen trees from a forest fire. All trails degrade over time, so there are always people who have to go in to monitor and do some scouting to see where trail work needs to be done.
The main trail problem within the Gila is that there are areas with some old fire scars. These are areas where fire once burned through. Depending on how hot the fire burns, it can cause a lot of dead standing trees. It is a natural 10 to 15 year cycle. In those areas, when those trees eventually fall, it causes jackstraw piles, which is when one tree falls and then another on top of that, and then another on top of that one. Imagine taking a bunch of drinking straws and just dropping them, and they land on top of each other in different kinds of ways. This is what it's like, and this is how those trees are falling on the trails, except for they are falling on trails for miles and miles. So trails that a lot of people would use for recreating, hiking, horseback riding, backpacking, and hunting are not usable anymore. This impacts access and the trail system, which are important for firefighters, administrative purposes, visitor access, and getting the lookout in and out of the wilderness. It's not great for people who want to go in and use wilderness, but it is also dangerous if there's another fire or something life-threatening in the wilderness, because now we cannot get people in and out. So when you think about trails, you need as much trail access as possible. And so being able to go in and clear out and maintain the trails is really important.
It is also really important to maintain the trails so that people can use them and easy access to the wilderness. The trails are maintained by utilizing primitive methods. There are no chainsaws and there are no mechanized equipment. There are big crews of people who are crosscut certified that are able to use the primitive tools for the trail work. They pack in equipment using horses and mules, and that is how they get things into the trails work. So now the question is, how do you maintain access if there are miles and miles of these jackstrawed areas that are not necessarily easy to access? Now you have to look at what is the risk for employees and who are going to go in with crosscut straws. How long is it going to take? What are we going to do with all this material in the end? Where do you prioritize your work? You have to take all these things into consideration. These are all the trail management challenges that the Gila wilderness managers deal with on a day-to-day basis.
There are many nonprofit organizations that help maintain the trails in the Gila wilderness. One nonprofit organization is the New Mexico Wilderness Alliance. This organization is dedicated to maintaining the trails and keeping them safe. There is currently a project that volunteers are working on where they will place signs on the trails so that those who are hiking on the trail are able to know exactly where on the trail they are. These signs will also tell people when they are entering the wilderness. Volunteers in this organization also clean the trail by picking up trash that has been scattered on the trail. It is very important to this organization that the trails stay clean and safe for hiking.
While reviewing through many documents about the trails and management of the Gila wilderness, and while talking to various people about it, it was easy to tell that wildfires are one of the biggest challenges that the land and land managers will face when trying to maintain the land and the trail systems. When speaking to a recent visitor, she had mentioned that there was damage to many trees, which was most likely caused by wildfire in the area. Keeping the area's damage to wildfires maintained is necessary in order to ensure the safety of the visitors, animals, and employees.
While trying to maintain, protect, and manage the wilderness trail system after wildfires and dead standing trees have fallen, there are a few different management alternatives that you can consider. People must decide on what is more effective and the most beneficial to the wilderness area. The few alternatives are to do nothing, to keep doing the same thing, and to make sure you have the tools that are necessary to quickly act on the wildfire. And then also, you can prevent the dead standing trees from falling on the trails.
This is the do nothing management alternative. This is beneficial to nature because it allows it to take its course and protect itself. The doing nothing alternative would be easy to implement and there are no costs that go into cleaning up the trails. However, doing nothing will not be effective for trail management issues. If we did nothing, this would limit access to the areas of the wilderness where trees have fallen and impacted the trail usages. If we did nothing, it would benefit non-human aspects the most.
Our second alternative would be to just keep doing the same thing that the management has been doing. So once the dead standing trees fall on the trails at Gila, crews of volunteers and employees of the Gila come in with horses and mules and non-mechanized tools to clean up and haul off the leftover materials to clear the trails. This alternative is easy to implement, but it takes time and effort. This alternative benefits both human and non-human aspects. This allows nature to run its course without any human influence, and once nature has run its course and the dead standing trees have fallen, we can go in to clean up the trails so that the public uses of the wilderness are not being limited. There are a few downsides to this. Once the trail is clear, you now have all this material with no place to put it. Also, it takes time and it can have labor costs. But on the other hand, there are many nonprofit organizations and people who devote their time to helping to clean up wilderness areas.
Alternative 3, have tools necessary to quickly act on wildfires. The third management alternative to maintain the wilderness area's trails would be by having tools that are necessary to quickly act on wildfires. This would include helicopters and planes that could fly over and quickly start maintaining the fire. This alternative overall would be extremely hard to implement for a various number of reasons. The first one being that obtaining the necessary tools would be cost effective and most likely the funding will not be able to afford them. And the second part of that would be actually getting the tools out to the wilderness and putting them into use without going against the Wilderness Act. These tools may not be allowed in the wilderness area as it may be mechanized equipment and may harm the area as well. This alternative does not have the potential to be effective by stopping the wildfires from reaching trails with the use of certain methods. Having tools necessary to quickly act on wildfires will benefit the humans more than the non-humans, as they are most likely going to be destroying some parts of the land to protect others.
The fourth management alternative is preventing dead trees from falling on the trails by cutting them down before they have a chance to fall and impact the trails. This alternative would be more difficult to implement because humans have to step in sooner to fix the problems, and there would be more tools used to solve the problems. This alternative takes time and has labor costs as well. There would also be a lot of leftover materials and debris once we have cut down all the trees. This alternative would be effective because it would solve the problem before the problem even started occurring on the trails. This alternative benefits humans more than non-humans because it would be used in order to keep the trails clean from debris, which would affect the non-humans' habitat. The cost of cutting down dead trees would be more to do to the use of tools and human labor, but there are also volunteers that would not cost.
When looking at the four alternatives, it is pretty hard in determining which one is going to be the most effective. You must look at the benefits and consequences of each one. It is clear that the first option, which is to do nothing, doesn't have any benefits, especially for trail use, trail management, and trail access. Doing nothing would lead to the destruction of trails overall. This then makes us This then takes us to the second option, which is to keep doing the same thing. This option is a very effective one and has many benefits as a whole, such as benefiting humans and non-humans, and it is not cost effective, which when using volunteers, and also keeps the environment safe and secure. The third option is to have tools necessary for wildfire that would cause the trails to be destroyed. This method seems like it would be very effective in some ways by keeping the area maintained, but overall would be extremely cost effective and labor effective, which leads this alternative to be very hard to implement. And then finally, the last alternative, prevention of dead trees falling on the trails, has many consequences, such as time and money and the human interaction with the land, making it difficult alternative to implement. When comparing these four alternatives, it is very clear that there is one that is more difficult, that is more effective, and the most beneficial under the Wilderness Act.
When considering the four management alternatives, we decided that the keep doing the same thing we have been doing alternative will be the most beneficial overall. We chose this because it will benefit both humans and non-humans and even protect the environment at such a little cost to where little to nothing of nature and trails are harmed along the way.